September 476 AD. In a villa outside Ravenna, a teenage boy hands over his crown to a barbarian general. His name is Romulus Augustulus, the last Roman emperor of the West. No battle, no burning city, just a quiet, almost bureaucratic surrender, recorded by a scribe who probably didn't think it was worth a second sentence. And that's the moment you were taught to remember. That's the date in the textbook, the year on the timeline, the answer on the quiz. 476, the fall of Rome. Here's the problem. Almost none of it is true. Rome didn't fall in a year. It didn't fall to barbarians storming the gates. It didn't fall because of moral decay, or decadent emperors, or lead poisoning from the plumbing, no matter how many documentaries told you so. What actually happened is stranger, slower, and in some ways more disturbing than any invasion, because it means empires can die without anyone ever declaring war on them. Stick with me, because by the end of this, you'll understand not just how Rome collapsed, but why the same slow failure could be happening again somewhere right now, and no one's calling it a collapse yet. Let's start with the myth, because you need to see how good it looks before I take it apart. Picture the scene Hollywood gives you. Visigoths pouring over the walls of Rome in 410, torches in hand, marble statues toppling, the Colosseum lit orange with fire. It's a great image. It's also mostly wrong. When Alaric and the Visigoths sacked Rome in 410, they were inside the city for 3 days. They looted, they took hostages, they did not burn it to the ground, they did not slaughter the population, and Rome, the actual city, kept functioning afterward. Senators still met, markets still opened. The event shocked the Mediterranean world psychologically, the way a modern capital being briefly occupied would shock us today. But it was a wound, not a killing blow. The empire had already been wounded 1,000 times before that, in ways far less cinematic and far more important, and almost none of them involved a sword. So if it wasn't barbarians smashing down the gate in one dramatic afternoon, what was it? To answer that, we have to go back 200 years before Romulus Augustulus ever handed over his crown, back to a crisis that doesn't get a single famous painting, doesn't get a movie, and yet did more damage to Rome than any barbarian king ever managed. Historians call it the crisis of the 3rd century, and it's where the real story begins. Imagine Rome around the year 250 AD. The empire stretches from Scotland to the Sahara, from Portugal to the Persian border. The largest, most integrated economy the ancient world has ever seen. Grain ships sail from Egypt to feed 1 million people in the capital. Roads move legions from the Rhine to the Euphrates in weeks. It looks, from the outside, unstoppable. But inside the treasury, something is quietly rotting. The government has a problem every empire eventually faces: paying for an army that never stops needing to be paid. Rome's answer is the oldest trick in the book. It starts shaving the silver. A denarius that was once genuinely silver gets diluted, batch by batch, mint by mint, until by the 270s, it's barely more than bronze with a silver wash. Picture the mint workers in Rome and Antioch stamping out coins that look identical to the ones from 50 years earlier, but are worth a fraction as much. Merchants aren't fooled for long. Prices start to spiral. A modius of wheat that cost a handful of coins under one emperor costs a fistful under the next. This is currency collapse, and it does something no barbarian raid ever could. It breaks trust in the system itself, quietly, in every market stall and grain warehouse from Gaul to Syria. And while the coinage is rotting, the throne is turning into a revolving door. Between 235 and 284 AD, Rome goes through more than 20 emperors. Most of them die violently, murdered by their own bodyguards, cut down by rival generals, killed by the very legions that raised them to power in the first place. Picture the Praetorian camp outside Rome, not as a place of order, but as a kind of imperial casino, where army units in Britain, on the Danube, and in Syria each try to crown their own commander and march him toward the capital. This is the part your textbook glosses over. For roughly 50 years, the Roman Empire is fighting itself far more than it's fighting outsiders. Frontiers get stripped of troops to feed civil wars. Provinces effectively secede. For a time, there's a breakaway Gallic Empire in the west and a breakaway Palmyrene Empire in the east, each with its own emperor, its own coinage, its own army. Rome, the supposed single empire, briefly fractures into three. That is not barbarians destroying Rome. That is Rome tearing itself apart from the inside, and it happens 2 centuries before anyone hands a crown to Odo Atta. Now, the empire does pull itself back together, barely, under tough soldier emperors like Aurelian, and then the great reformer Diocletian. But the fix comes at a brutal cost, and this is the part of the story that really matters, because it sets up everything that follows. Diocletian looks at an empire too vast for one man to govern and one treasury to fund, and he makes a fateful decision. He splits the administration in two, an eastern half and a western half, each eventually with its own emperor, its own bureaucracy, its own army. Picture 2 great households that used to share one kitchen and one purse, now living under separate roofs, each responsible for feeding and defending itself. On paper, it's efficient. In practice, it means that when trouble comes, the 2 Romes no longer automatically save each other. And to pay for the vastly bigger army and bureaucracy needed to hold the frontiers, Diocletian and his successors squeeze the tax base harder than ever, freezing peasants to their land, tying craftsmen to their trades, making tax collection hereditary and inescapable. Imagine a farmer in Gaul, generation after generation, legally forbidden from ever leaving his father's plot of land, because the state needs his harvest guaranteed on the books. This is not the free, thriving Rome of the history class posters. This is a state turning increasingly rigid and extractive just to keep functioning. And rigid systems, historians will tell you, are the ones that shatter rather than bend when the next real shock arrives. And the next shock arrives on schedule. By the late 300s, pressure is building far to the east. The Huns, sweeping in from the steppes of Central Asia, are pushing Gothic tribes westward, right up against the Roman frontier on the Danube. Here's where the story gets genuinely uncomfortable, because it isn't really an invasion story at all. It's a refugee story. In 376 AD, tens of thousands of Gothic men, women, and children arrive at the Danube, begging Roman officials for permission to cross and settle inside the empire, fleeing the Huns behind them. Picture the riverbank crowded with wagons, livestock, entire families waiting for Roman soldiers to decide their fate. Rome says yes, but corrupt local officials exploit the starving refugees for profit, selling them rotten food at extortionate prices, even, according to some accounts, trading dog meat for children sold into slavery. It is a humanitarian catastrophe managed by greed, and it explodes. The Goths rise up, and in 378, at the Battle of Adrianople, they annihilate a Roman field army and kill the Eastern Emperor Valens himself. That's the real turning point people rarely name. Not a foreign horde smashing Rome for the fun of it, but a refugee crisis mismanaged into a war whose survivors, the Goths, never leave. They become a permanent, armed, unassimilated population inside imperial territory. And Rome never fully solves the problem of what to do with them. Later, one of their leaders is a man named Alaric. He's the same Alaric who sacks Rome in 410, not as a foreign conqueror arriving from outside, but as a man who has spent years serving in Roman armies, holding Roman titles, negotiating with Roman courts, and finally running out of patience with an empire that keeps promising him payment and land and never delivering. The barbarian at the gate, in other words, had spent a decade trying to get inside the system peacefully first. So picture the Western Empire by the early 400s, its treasury drained by decades of debasement and civil war, its peasantry locked to the land and taxed to exhaustion, its frontiers patrolled increasingly by the very peoples it once fought, its two halves no longer reliably supporting each other. This is a body already weakened by internal disease, and now the fevers hit one after another. Alaric's Goths sack Rome in 410. The Vandals, another displaced group, pushed west by the same domino chain from the steppes, cross into Roman North Africa, and by 439, seize Carthage, the empire's richest grain-producing province outside Egypt. Picture the granaries of Carthage, once loaded onto ships bound for Rome and feeding the capital's population, now controlled by an entirely different kingdom. That's not just a military loss. It's Rome losing one of the last regions still generating enough tax revenue to pay for an army at all. Without North Africa's grain and gold, the Western government simply cannot afford soldiers anymore, and without soldiers, it cannot enforce tax collection anywhere else, and without tax collection, it cannot afford soldiers. Picture that spiral as a slow-motion financial collapse, not a war. Provincial governors and local landowners quietly deciding it's cheaper and safer to make private deals with a nearby Gothic or Frankish warlord than to keep sending money to a distant, increasingly powerless emperor in Ravenna. Loyalty to Rome doesn't get conquered. It gets economically irrelevant, region by region, until finally there's barely an empire left to be loyal to. By the time Romulus Augustulus hands his crown to Odoacer in 476, the Western Roman state has been hollowed out for decades. Rome itself limped through emperors who were often teenagers, puppets of whichever general controlled the last functioning army. Odoacer doesn't even bother naming himself Emperor of the West. He just sends the crown to Constantinople and rules Italy as a king, because by then, the title barely means anything worth having. Picture that moment properly. It's not a dramatic ending. It's paperwork. The formal acknowledgement of a collapse that had already, quietly, finished happening. And here's the detail that should really unsettle you, the one that gets left out of almost every classroom telling of this story. The Roman Empire didn't fall in 476. Only half of it did. The eastern half, richer, better fortified, with Constantinople's massive triple walls and a tax base that never collapsed the way the West's did, kept going. Historians call it the Byzantine Empire, but the people living in it never stopped calling themselves Romans. Their empire survives for nearly another 1,000 years, until Constantinople finally falls to the Ottomans in 1453. Think about what that means. The empire you were taught fell in 476 actually kept existing under the same name its people used for themselves for roughly the same span of time between us and the Magna Carta. What collapsed in 476 wasn't Rome. It was one half of a Rome that had already split itself into two unequal halves 2 centuries earlier, and the weaker half finally ran out of money, soldiers, and reasons for its provinces to stay loyal. So if you want the real answer to how Rome actually collapsed, it isn't a single cause and it isn't barbarians. It's a currency debased until nobody trusted it. It's 50 years of generals murdering each other for a throne while frontiers went unguarded. It's a tax system so rigid it strangled the very peasants and merchants meant to fund it. It's a refugee crisis mishandled into a war whose survivors never left. And it's provinces that discovered, one by one, that a distant, expensive, dysfunctional imperial government was no longer worth paying for. Put together, that's not a fall. That's a slow, decades-long unraveling of trust between citizens and currency, between provinces and capital, between soldiers and the state paying them. And that kind of unraveling doesn't announce itself with a burning city. It looks, most of the time, like paperwork, like a teenage emperor quietly signing something away in a villa, while almost nobody in the empire notices anything has changed at all. If there's one thing worth carrying out of this video, it's that empires rarely die from a single dramatic blow. They die from years of small, boring failures that compound until the whole structure can't hold its own weight anymore. And by the time everyone notices, the ending already happened quietly, months or years before. Rome's western half is the clearest case in history, but it's not the only one. In the next episode of Empire's Rise and Fall, we're heading east to Constantinople itself to find out how that other half of Rome managed to survive not just decades, but centuries longer, and what finally, after 1,000 years, brought its walls down for good. If this kind of history, the real story behind the textbook version, is what you're here for, stay close, because we're just getting started.